Hey guys, our last study ended with Pilate's verdict being handed down, that he released Barabbas instead of releasing Jesus, and he handed him over to be scourged, which was just horrible. It was not humane at all. Instead of a whip, it was a whip with shards of glass and metal on the end of it that would have just ripped down the back of the person, and a lot of people just died from the scourging alone, but it would have just left Jesus's back being this bleeding hunk of flesh. And then he handed him over to the soldiers to do what they had perfected in as far as torture is concerned, and that would have been crucifixion. But as the soldiers are taking him to be crucified, they make a stop and they spend some time with Jesus. We're going to look at that. So we're in Mark 15 and verse 16. Then the soldiers led him away into the hall called Praetorium, and they called together the whole garrison. And they clothed him with purple, and they twisted a crown of thorns, put it on his head, and began to salute him, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And then they struck him on the head with a reed and spat on him, and bowing the knee, they worshipped him. When they had mocked him, they took the purple off him, and put his own clothes on him, and led him out to crucify him. They take him to the Praetorium, which is like a general's quarters, probably where the governor's office is or something like that. And they gather together the soldiers around him, and they take his clothes off of him, put this purple robe on him, which is the collar of royalty. They put this crown of thorns, twisted out of thorn branches, on his head. They beat him over the head. They spit on him. They bow down and kneel and say, "Hail, King of the Jews." But they're mocking him. They're making fun of him. They're trying to humiliate him. And they're taking his clothes on and off of him, probably took his clothes off of him when they scourged him and put him back on him. They led him over here, took his own clothes off of him, put this purple robe on him, which they take off of him to put his own clothes on him, to lead him out to be crucified, to take his clothes off of him again. Just like this rag doll that's being dragged around just at the will of the soldiers. Just this position of great vulnerability and humility. And think about it. This would have been absolutely demoralizing. This would have been humiliating. He thinks he's something. He thinks he's the king. This would have been incredibly painful. They put this crown of thorns on his head, then they beat him over the head, which would have driven those thorns deep into his skull. And then they put his clothes on and off of him. His back is already this bleeding hunk of flesh. And I'm sure his clothes is drying to him, so they have to rip him off of him. I mean, this is just horrible. He's the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. And they're treating him like he's some kind of phony, like he's just a criminal. And so he could retaliate. He could have responded with legions of angels. And his rights and his privileges are being stripped away here, but he's never losing his composure. He's keeping his calmness about him. So the next time we think, this is not right for them to do. I have my rights and I have my privileges. We need to look to Jesus. I like the way that Peter puts it in 1 Peter chapter 2. He's telling servants here to be submissive not only to the good masters, but also to the harsh ones. And he says that Christ suffered for us, leaving us an example. That when he was reviled, he didn't revile in return. That when he suffered, he didn't threaten. But he committed himself to the Father who judges righteously. He's just such an example. Here we have the King of Kings exchanging his crown of gold for a crown of thorns. And instead of being worshipped and being honored, he's being mocked and being belittled.